Oh, wrong end. Welcome. Yep. Welcome to the April 18th meetup of the Coast Division. This is virtual meetup, happens every 2 weeks. Really simple meeting today. We're just going to talk a little about upcoming events, then just have a discussion, kind of a quiet day. We'll look to next time we get together having a clinic, and we'll figure that out in the next couple of weeks. Few comments on upcoming events. We're going to do a modeling on the coast on June 13th. Turns out between now and then there were a lot of activities. At the end of May, there's actually an operating session that a number of people are going to. So June 13th was the next good date. That's a really exciting time. I think we had 7 people last time that came and talked about their models. The PCR convention is 4:30 to 5:3, so that's only in 2 weeks. So if you haven't registered, go ahead and get registered for that. Looks like it's going to be a great convention. I've looked through the clinics, lots of good clinics. There are a number of layout tours that are already up in the area up there, and there's some pretty interesting prototype tours, including a Saturday tour of the Surgeon's Mill, which I would strongly encourage folks, if you get a chance, to go to. And even if you can't go to the convention for the whole convention, buy a Saturday day ticket so you can go to that. One of the things is it actually costs a chunk of money to open that, and it's really great for us in the PCR to have that available. So PCR2026.org, and that'll get you there. Coast auction, June 21st. That is the next coast auction. We had to move it from June 14th. They had a conflict and couldn't move it forward because we had another conflict. So it will be June 21st at the Mastic Center in Alameda, where we've done it in the past. So there's going to be some great items. We have some more estate items, some of the ones we had from last time. So it should be a lot of fun. And finally, the national convention is July 27th to August 2nd in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Interesting area. Seems like one of the things that seems very interesting is there are a whole bunch of Civil War battlegrounds around there. So with that, we'll just throw it open to general discussion. Any
Well, Phil,
yes.
I've got one other thing for calendar. BAPM is now the 27th of June.
Okay, excellent. And that's in Richmond, where it typically is at the church in Richmond.
Same place, Richmond. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, one of the things we actually had a board meeting, PCR board meeting this last week, and we had a discussion about the calendar. And one of the things we agreed was that we've kind of focused the calendar on NMRA events, primarily PCR events, and we're going to change that and open it up to essentially any Northern California, Northern Nevada, Hawaii railroad event. And we should have, my hope is that over the next week or so, next couple of weeks, or at least right after the convention, we'll have a mechanism where when you go to the website, you'll just click and there'll be a form and you enter your event, and then it'll be placed on the calendar. Kind of the goal is to make the PCR calendar the kind of, lack it for a better word, the information source for railroading events in Northern California, Nevada, and Hawaii. So that should be good. We'll get that on there, and yeah, if you can, you'll send me some information on that. I'll put it in and put a slide on it for our next meetup. So anything exciting happening? Any exciting modeling? Anybody building anything interesting? Bob's here. Bob's going to show us something he's been doing. Bob seems to be kind of the one consistent person who gets something done every couple of weeks. You're muted, Bob.
It helps me keep my sanity. I tell them I have to do it. So what I'm doing right now is working on building an NN3 layout, and I actually got to the point where I had. So I'm doing this on hand laid code 40 track, and so my concept is to build sectional track in NN3 so that I can then reuse it over time. And so I've built the first two things I built were right? Two half circles of track. So these make my first made my first circle, and I got that running earlier in the week. And now I've built two pieces of straight track, 1 foot long. So this is really a test of concept because I want to use this to build a layout. And the first step is getting an oval. The second step is building some switches. And then the third step is building a small test layout with an oval reversing loop and a small yard that will be the terminus of a point-to-point layout. So today what I'm doing is wiring. I'm at the point where I'm gonna put some feeder wires on these and then put them together and wire them up. The thing that it was I thought would be a challenge, but worked out pretty well, is I got the ends of the rail to line up extremely precisely with the end of an aluminum mount. And I have a 1/4 inch hole, and I put an 832 screw through it, sort of like California Coast, Central Coast modules have a like a 3/16 hole for joining modules, and then they use a 1/4 inch bolt, so they have a little bit of wiggle room so they can align things precisely. So my job on the module level is to get the rails to be exactly at the end of where the aluminum butts up, and then I have a little bit of wiggle room because the rails aren't always perfectly centered on the middle, or maybe not the exact perfect height. So this worked well on my initial circle of track. I have a Rokuhan Shorty, which is a little powered truck that cost me $25. So that's my motive power. I plan on putting a DCC decoder on top of the little truck. When somebody else is talking, I'll go get the little shorty. It's in another room and bring it back. But I'm planning on having my NN3 run DCC for everything. So just because it's small doesn't mean that it can't run DCC. And some of the DCC encoders are extraordinarily small. So what I'm going to try to do with the shorty box cab diesel actually isn't much scratch building, because Tom Knapp has a printed shell, 3D printed shell up at 3DP, all ready to go on top of the shorty chassis. And he has a video showing how to wire up the decoder onto it. So it's one of the easiest possible kit bashed NN3 locomotives with a sunk cost of probably about $60. I don't know how much the decoder is going to cost, but 60, $70 all in for a running DCC controlled NN3 locomotive that'll crawl at maybe 2 scale miles an hour, which, if you look at the Bachmann ON30 stuff, DCC, that stuff crawls at a half an hour, mile an hour out of the box. But in smaller scales, that's always been a challenge. I had HON3 in the late 80s, and that stuff was crap. I remotored everything I got. It wouldn't run lower than like 20 miles an hour, and it wouldn't run in reverse well, the brass that I got. And so I ended up remotoring all my HON3. So the idea of having a small, I'm a steam locomotive guy, but I'm happy to have a running locomotive in NN3 that looks like it'll be about $70 or something like that. And I'm having a blast doing track work. This is printed circuit board ties with basswood underneath. So this is all, that's what I'm doing. I plan on putting feeder wires on this and hooking it back up as an oval and showing it running at my 2 o'clock NN3 Group IO Zoom call, which spans from Hawaii to England. So that's my biggest
Bob,
spanning.
one quick question.
Yeah,
Do you have the 3 CD set of North Pacific Coast on the North Pacific Coast?
no, I don't.
Are you going to be at the convention?
Maybe depends on how things go. I want to go, but we'll
Okay,
see.
I was going to say I'm offloading a lot of things. You can have it.
Oh, okay, let's just talk offline.
So Bob,
Okay.
getting back to your track work, how do you plan to do the turnouts? Are you going to hand lay the turnouts, or is there any? I
Yeah.
can't imagine there's.
So I made jigs out of 20,000 styrene
Oh
on a piece of
yeah,
plywood. And so this was the first jig I made. I then made a jig. I don't have it here. I made a jig for doing a 180-degree curve. And I'm going to
I remember
make
that.
jigs for doing the switches in the same way. I'll create recesses for the printed circuit board ties, lay them in, and then I'll create them on a jig. Then I put the ties on next with cyanoacrylate onto the bottom of the printed circuit board tie rail assembly, and then after that, I glue it down on a road bed that I make myself.
Well, I was just thinking about I had seen this before where you'd use the jigs for the ties, but I'm thinking about you're using Code 40 rail, which is pretty tiny. So you're going to file the frogs and solder
Oh
those,
yeah,
and
yeah. There are guys in the NN3 group IO that use code 30 drawn wire. And
jeez.
so I'm using heavy rail compared to them. But code 40 is perfect for what I'm trying to do because North Pacific Coast ran 55-pound rail and it's pretty close. And code 40 is doable, especially given that I don't have spikes, so I don't have flange problems.
Amazing work. Do you have special glasses? Special optimizer?
No,
Oh man, that's
no.
tiny stuff.
Yeah, but it all goes pretty easily and quickly. And I put on a YouTube video on something and listen to it and just drop ties down and I actually really like track work. It's sort of a perverse enjoyment, but I actually very, very much enjoy doing track work. So I'm looking forward to doing a two-way stub switch first, and then I'm going to do a three-way stub switch because that's one of the design
Hmm.
elements of my railroad. And so what I'm trying to do is prove to myself that NN3 is viable before I put a lot of time and money into it. So first I did some straight track. Could I do any track at all? Yeah. Okay, great. So can I do some curve track? Apparently so. So I can do curve track. So I have a locomotive that works. I made my throttle. This is great. So no money involved. My throttle is a 5-volt Panasonic cordless phone battery charger, 5 volt, and I pulled up a tray of resistors. I'm trying to figure out what variable resistor I want to use. So it runs well between 0 and about 700 ohms. So I basically, uh, everybody else has throttles with back EMF. I got the little shorty to run at about 10 miles an hour, which is pretty good for such a small locomotive on just a wall wart and 700 ohms of resistance. So that's what I have right now.
Well, for now, but you're going to put DCC on it. You said eventually.
Yeah, why put money into a DC throttle with back?
Sure.
There are
Right.
DC throttles with back EMF for running these small Markland Z scale and other stuff, but the DCC decoders have back EMF support in them anyway.
Hmm.
So I'm planning on doing that.
That's the other thing I was thinking of. So, and are you, so you got those straight track sections with the bracket. Are you going to rail join them together, or do you think you'll
No,
align them
no,
enough
they
you
they
won't
butt
need?
up. They butt
Yeah,
up.
I was
They
thinking you
butt
wouldn't need
up.
the rail joiners, right?
They butt up right. They butt up right next to each other.
Yeah.
The tolerance at the end is plus 0, minus 1 or 2 thousandths from the end. So they're and frankly, I'm sort of riffing off of the yard at the CCC ON30 Club because it doesn't use rail joiners at all. The big
Hmm.
yard complex, right, Phil? It just brings the rail. It doesn't use little spacers between the rails. It just brings the track right up next to each other, right?
I Yeah, that's the same thing I did in my module, right? So
Yeah.
what you do is you use what are called table pins. They're these little brass. You drill a hole. You
Line them
clamp the
alignment pins.
it's alignment pins. They use if you ever had a table where you put a leaf in the table, there are those pins that go in the leaf in the table. And what you do is you basically bolt the modules together, drill a couple of holes through, and then you put the pins in. And there's one side is looks like a bullet, and the other side looks like a little hole. And then they'll align perfectly. And then what you do is you get it all aligned, then you lay the track, and after you've got it all done, you go ahead and cut the rail. And what I did was I actually put a little thin spacer in when I clamped it together to lay the rail. And then when you make the cut, the rails actually come almost perfectly together. The only downside to that, quite frankly, is you really have to have a protector plate
Yes, I was just
on
thinking
the
about that.
end of the module. So I have a couple of pieces of plywood that I just screw on with a couple of just wood screws, and they cover the ends of the track so that when you move it around,
You don't
otherwise
catch it.
somebody
Yes.
just can accidentally catch it with their shirt and rip the ends of
Yeah.
the rails up.
Yeah, I was worried. I was thinking
Um,
about that. Okay.
Here, if you guys hang, well, while you guys are talking, I'll see if I can pull up some pictures. I have somewhere in my plethora of pictures, I have a picture of that.
Yeah. So my concept is to rip off as many good ideas as I can so that I don't
Oh,
invent too much
absolutely.
stuff from scratch. So I did some stuff from scratch to do this, but just to put things in perspective, that's the little locomotive that I can put a decoder on and will run at 1 scale mile an hour or 2 scale miles an hour, which I find amazing because I
It is
thought
amazing.
if it's small, there's no way it's going to go. Everybody said, "Oh, be prepared for this is going to zip around the track." If you put 10 volts on this, or 9, it'll burn out with 12. It's a jackrabbit. But then again, a lot of locomotives are jackrabbits if you put 12 volts on them anyway. That's not new in model railroading. So let's see what else I got.
Tom?
Oh yeah. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So here, I'll share this. This is so this is how I did it. So this is basically two modules. You can see the break here, and these are where the tracks cross between the modules. And there are quite frankly a bunch of tracks here because this module is fairly dense. And you can see what I did here. You know, one of the challenges we've had is that when you lay track on foam, the foam actually over time will um, basically compress or whatever you want to call it, shrink a little tiny bit. And the problem is that tends to make the rails at the edge kind of a little bit of a hockey puck. So if you see what I've done here is there's actually wood underneath this right here. You really can't see it very well. And then this is wood. And the reason that's wood is these are PC ties. They're those gap masters and they're glued to the wood. And then the rail is basically attached to them. And then they go into, and this is that Homa bed that continues on. And so this is what it looks like up close. And you notice that there's a gap in here. And then I've cut the rails. And that way, when you put it back together, the gaps will come back together. And then this is what it looks like when you open it up. Is you see, I actually put about 4 of these pins in. So they just pin into each other and just hold them perfectly aligned. And then, like I said, I've got a plate I made to go over the end here to protect the rails. So yeah, it works. It works pretty well. That's based not on my idea. That was Dave, and what he did was some of the things because he's a cabinet shop guy, so he knows all the tools and tricks. So,
So I
but
think I'm
that's
going to do
only
that between modules, and then I'm going to use the slightly larger hole and then get them lined up perfectly for road bed within a module. So I plan on also doing quarter turns, and I figured out how I'm going to do gentle curves as well. They get done by laying out only one rail on the track, then fitting the track to the road to the place where I want with single-sided tape, and then soldering the second rail in place, lifting that up, and then putting the ties on the bottom. We'll see how that works. That's every part of this is still a test and an experiment, and I'm willing to go, oh, well, that didn't work. Try it again, different. But so far, things have worked pretty well, and I'll just keep trying and experimenting. But the stub switch, I'll get this hooked up today for the 2 o'clock, and then I'm going to dive into doing a jig for a number 8 stub switch.
Cool.
Back when I was thinking about doing, is anybody else speaking?
No.
Okay, back when I was doing the FN3 version of the North Pacific Coast, I wondered about how to do those G-scale stub switches. I thought that would have been neat.
So somebody sent me I think Wayne Perry, forget his last name, sent me a,
Okay.
yeah, Perry sent me a like a 50-page PDF from an article that he wrote on how to do O scale stub switches, ON3 stub switches. So a lot of that works, but some of that's really different in NN3. And then I got sort of a little bit of a treatise from Tom Knapp, who has a working NN3 stub switch that he built. And so I took pictures of that and blew that up and got all the proportions and measurements. So I'm sort of triangulating from a couple of different places to figure out how to do this. But the three-way switch is interesting because generally with two-way stub switches, they don't really locate the moving rails. They just have a stop at the end. So you stop when it gets on one side. So it's actually sort of easier to do with the three-way. You actually have to have a positive detent at the center that makes the mechanism more complicated than for a two-way. So I'm pretty sure I got that figured out, but we'll take it a step at a time, and I'll do a two-way first.
Cool. Anybody else got anything interesting today? It's going to be a quiet Saturday, I think. Well, the Warriors got beat last night, so I'm wearing my Warriors t-shirt, just kind of in after reading the news this morning, and they said the Warriors dynasty is over. So a little bit of a
In memoriam,
continued support.
your in memoriam T-shirt. You know, the end of the
Yeah,
dynasty.
exactly. The end of the dynasty. Well, and I started thinking about that, and I never understood. I wonder if there's any sort of weird connotation in the word dynasty is dy nasty. So never thought about that before until this morning when I thought of it.
Nasty.
Yeah, it's you never thought about the fact that it's basically a preface to the word nasty.
Yeah, well, actually, I was surprised they even made the play-in game. They had a losing season, I think. So I was surprised they got that far.
I was surprised they won the first game. That was kind of Herculean, and of course the only nice thing if they'd won, quite frankly, was that they would have had two more games at home, which would have been nice. It's yeah, well, that's who knows. The only reason that would have been great would be Jonathan, because he works at the Jonathan Kwai works at the Chase Center, and so would have had 2 more days of working. Would have been nice for Jonathan. kind of the biggest reason. So
I've got one thing to share real quick.
cool.
Okay, so almost a year ago, I showed you guys this. This is my DRGW Athearn Blue Box SD40T-2, and it's a dummy, no motor or anything. So I put some lights into it and things like that. And then back then, I had put in a couple of speakers, and along with a DCC decoder up on top with sound. Now, of course, this is your standard DCC decoder, which also has the leads for the motor. Obviously, there's no motor in this thing. And when I ran it at Golden State, it ran fine and it produced sound just fine. So I thought, oh, great. Well, one time I went through a switch a wrong way, which obviously caused a short, and this thing died. The sound died. I couldn't get the sound back no matter what I did. And I tested it out, and it seems like the decoder's pretty much fried, I guess. I have a replacement decoder, but I didn't want to put it in, figuring that if I did the same thing would happen. Short it out, and it would die. And so I haven't figured out in a year, I haven't figured out what to do with this thing. I'd like to get it back up and running. I just don't want it to short out again.
So shorting out shouldn't damage a decoder.
Exactly.
Now,
That's something's.
What will damage the decoder is if you go across a place where you're going between two boosters, and the boosters are out of phase. So I had that happen. I had that happen on a ON30 on the ON30 modular layout. We set it up, and we have two power blocks, two power districts, and they were out of phase. And I ran the 2662 Bachmann over it, and all of a sudden there was a puff of smoke, and I thought I'd blow the decoder. It turned out when I got it home, started taking it apart, I realized that what it did was it melted the wires between the tender and the engine. Because what happens is, if you think about it, if you have two boosters, they are synced, so the signals are going at the same time. If you put those 180 degrees out of phase, then they're going the opposite direction, which means you can actually have a 30-volt signal between the rails on the same unit, or between where you go across. In my case, what happened was the 26 or 28 gauge or 30 gauge wire they use between the tender to carry the power from the tender pickups carry the power pickups from the engine to the tender where the decoder is, those became a fusible link. If you have those wired directly into the engine or into the decoder, I think if the decoder sees 30 volts, it'll just go. So I might look at whether there's a phase issue there or something like that, because a short shouldn't cause a decoder to fail.
Does Seth Neumann have some sort of contraption to prevent that?
No. The way you have to prevent it is you have to get a ramp meter, and you go to where the problem, you got to look at your layout, and wherever two power districts come together, you've got to actually go in there you take your ramp meter and you put it on the two rails that are together, not across the two rails, but on the same side.
Oh,
and if you go across the power district there and see voltage,
I'm thinking of some sort of fuse type thing.
Well, the problem with the circuit breakers is, circuit breakers might solve it, but again, sometimes you have enough current that it's still, before the circuit breaker pops, that it actually pops the locomotive, because it's not a short, right? It's not a short.
It's an over voltage.
It's an over voltage situation. So yeah, you might want to get a ramp meter and go look at that turnout and see if there's something, if like the siding or something off the turnout, maybe somebody put the phase on that wrong. That would be the one. That would be the thing I would expect that would cause a decoder to burn out. Either that.
I'm never going to face it.
If you got a
I'm
single
never going to
booster,
face the problem. My layout's too small. It's only one power district.
if you only have a single booster, it doesn't matter. It's when you add your second booster, you've got to be concerned about phasing. So that would be my one suggestion. And generally on a home layout or a club layout, this is not an issue because when you do the wiring, if you check the phases everywhere you have power districts, you basically eliminate it. The one thing might be if somebody put a siding in or something, if you reverse the wires on the siding, and maybe the engine's going across it, it wasn't a problem before.
Yeah.
But
well, all I know is that this thing's deader than a doornail. I've tried everything to get it to work. It doesn't. So I was actually on looking at email yesterday. And I got this email from Yankee Dabbler about sale and all this kind of stuff. So I looked at it. Went over to the decoders section. Apparently ESU has a new Lock Sound 5 decoder, which is sound only, no motor outputs. Plus it also has protection against spikes. So I'm going to try that. I've already ordered it. I'm going to try that and stick that in there and see if that works. Because I'd love to get the sound back into my dummy locomotives.
Well, it looks like you have a light board across the top of the two speakers. Is that what that is?
Yeah.
You sure? Have you checked it? Is it clean? There's nothing on there that's been damaged?
No, I mean I can't tell whether electronic components is damaged or not.
Right.
It's a motherboard with this little sound thing that plugs
Right.
into it. Yeah. I mean, this is old. These are real old things that I got, on sale. These aren't even probably in production anymore. But I figured, hey, they were cheap, and it looks like it would work, and it did work for a while. But yeah, this isn't modern stuff at all. This is early decoder stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna try this new Lock Sound one and see if it works. And if it has the protection and no motor outputs I don't have to worry about, then I can download the sound of the prime mover into it since I have a ESU programmer and I can do that too. So
that's actually interesting because one of the things we've been doing at Pleasanton is we bought a bunch of what are called 408 decoders from NCE. They're a 4 amp non-sound. I think they have about 6 or 8 functions. So they have motor output power, and then they have front and rear lights, and then they have I think they have 4 more outputs. So they're kind of nice and they're relatively cheap. We bought a bunch of them for under $30 a number of years ago. And what you do is in an O scale locomotive, in a steam locomotive, the way O scale locomotives work is they have the tender picks up on one side of the tracks and the engine picks up on the other rail. And then there's a connection. The drawbar between them actually brings the rail that's picked up by the tender over to the engine. So it's insulated on the engine side. And then you have a wire that runs from there normally just to the motor. So the motor connects to the chassis on the engine side, which connects to one rail. It connects to a pin that goes through the drawbar to the tender on the other side, and that gives the power to the motor. So when you DCC one of those, what you do is just disconnect the wire from the frame to the motor, the wire from the drawbar to the motor, connect that to a 408 decoder, connect the output of the motor. And it literally is like a 20-minute job to put a decoder in it because they're so big that decoder you can fit in really easily in the locomotive. Then what you can do if you really want sound is you put a sound decoder in the tender, a separate sound decoder, give it the same DCC address, but it's in the decoder. The only thing you lose doing that is, if you buy the new decoder from from Soundtracks. I don't know about ESU, but I know Soundtracks does it. They use what's called EMF, which is the electromagnetic field feedback from the motor. And if you set it up right, they can use that to change the sound characteristics as you use the engine. So as it's under more load, the sound from the decoder will actually reflect that there's more load. You lose that because you're not actually connected to the motor, but other than that, it's a pretty reasonable. I'll have to look at that. How much was the ESU sound decoder, just out of curiosity, at Yankee Dabbler?
It was on sale. It said usually about $90. It was on sale for 65.
Okay, that's not too bad. That's because what I've been looking at was just using an HO decoder. You just buy an HO decoder and just ignore the motor circuit and just just put it in for sound. So that's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to go. I got the Yankee Dabbler ad. I'll have to go look at that.
Yeah, it's 58,219. Yep. So anyway, I'll give it a try and see if it works.
Gotta go, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Have a great day.
All right. Bye, Bob.
Bob?
Oh, he's gone.
Oh, he's already gone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well. I just got a notice that they canceled an Airbnb on me. I don't know, didn't know if they would do that.
Hopefully, it's not the one we've got in Santa Fe.
It is the one in Santa Fe.
Uh,
I mean, I literally just saw I got an email from them. Let me go see what happened here.
well, like I say, I've been tending to use VRBO. They've been more reliable.
Yeah, I may go to VRBO. It was VRBO was just more money when I looked at them there, but
Well, yeah, they a little bit more money, but I think that's because you don't have all this surprise charges afterwards that Airbnb throws in.
That's Phil because you bought the one in Minneapolis for the narrow gauge convention. It's
no,
like
I don't
that.
know. They don't seem to say anything. They just said it was canceled.
Nice of them.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
It's now an active crime scene and there's yellow tape, so you can't go.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it wasn't just a spurious error. You might want to check it with
I just sent a
the
message to the
with
host. Yeah.
to the host, yeah, and just say what's that? What's this all about? Yeah, we're gone in what, about 3 weeks now? Mid-May?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, I have to do that right after we get off of here. Go figure it out.
Well, obviously, let us know.
Yep. Oh, agree. Oh, well, we'll figure it out.
Well, I don't think there's much else going this morning, so maybe we should just
No, I
wrap it
think
up
so.
for
I think we'll
today.
just call it a day. And
I got other things to work on, so Um,
Okay.
but it was just good to hang out for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Everybody have a good one. We will talk again next week, I guess. So, or 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
See what's going on in 2 weeks. Make sure we don't have any issues in 2 weeks. Do we have is 2 weeks a good day to get back together again? Looks like that's what, May 2nd looks like.
That's usually an operating day, but we're not operating that day, so I might actually be around.
Yeah. Actually,
I
you
s
know what? I think that's in the middle of the convention.
Yeah,
So we're probably going to cancel the next
because
meeting.
Rick Fortin canceled his ops because that's the convention weekend.
Yep. And then the next weekend after that is actually when I'm in Santa Fe. So I'll have to have Jesse if he'll cover that one. That'll be the 16th of May. So I'll talk to Jesse because I'll be in Santa Fe, so I won't be able to host that weekend.
Hmm.
So oh well, we'll see everybody in about 6 weeks. That was some folks in 4 weeks and other activities, but in 6 weeks we'll be getting back together
Okay.
in 4 weeks with Jesse. Everyone
All
have a
right.
great Saturday.
Thanks,
Keep on
Phil.
modeling. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.